A nossa próxima palestrante, senhora Heleen Van Den Hombergh, tem uma trajetória de estudos de florestas tropicais, desenvolvimento rural e movimentos sociais. É assessora sênior para a Unidade de Natural Capital and Value Chains do Comitê Nacional de IUCN dos Países Baixos. Diretora da Fundação Green Beat Performers, que promove a sustentabilidade através de espetáculos de música. E ela vai nos falar sobre boa gestão de recursos naturais, certificação e muito mais. The floor is yours. You prefer this one?
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be able to speak to you today. Thank you for inviting me. I work indeed for the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and particularly for the Dutch platform. We unite 40 different organizations that are located in the Netherlands and that are member of IUCN International. And among them are, for example, WWF, the Netherlands, or BirdLife International, Wetlands International, both ends, and other groups. I'm very happy that the former speakers have already highlighted, let's say, international tendencies and the problem, let's say, of the high pressure on land by food, feed, fuel, and other uses, and the necessity also to reduce that impact also on our side in Europe. And I'm also happy that the former speaker has highlighted the necessity to come to more territorial approaches, more landscape-wide approaches. Why I gave my title, Good Management of Natural Resources, Amplifying RTRS in the Landscape. That title has come up very recently, but I think that RTRS has a role to play, stronger than maybe the former speakers have been able to say, and I'm trying to make that argument today. I have to direct it to some. Okay, right? Yeah. In September last year, I visited, together with ProYungas, a partner organization in northern Argentina, I visited the Jujuy and Salta provinces, and we made 1,000 kilometers of a trip through the soy area. Well, it isn't exactly the time of soy, but we encountered a lot of these fields where totally dry soy was left over on the fields, and it wasn't worth harvesting. So the harvests were there, I think sometimes less than 200 kilos per hectare, but these soy fields weren't even worth harvesting. So I wondered, what's at stake there? What's happening? Is it a farmer who didn't make good agricultural practice, such as rotation, for example? Is it a bad land use planning in the province of Jujuy? Is it a lack of management of water streams in the vicinity? Or is it even accelerating regional climate change? Shocks and desertification in the Grand Chaco. We know that that's an area that already knows a lot of climate variability and extreme events such as droughts and ice rains and this kind of stuff. And this is actually accelerating in the last years. Is it a matter of pushing nature over its limits, geographically and maybe in other ways as well? So the Grand Chaco, not to highlight this case today very much, but as an example, it knows a deforestation of 500,000 hectares per year. And from the Argentina side, 80% of soy expansion takes place in that area, while only 1% is protected. This is a risk to the producers in the very first place, but also to the Argentina economy, for which soy is very important, and also a risk to the Dutch productive sector that obtains soy from that area. So we say natural capital is future capital. There is a collective business case that we have in respecting nature's limitations and building on its potential. So take into account natural capital in decision making. If this is about full-fledged natural capital accounting in your companies, well, of course, we're very much in favor of that. But it's at least of having in mind the value of nature for long-term productivity. Well, for that, good governance at all levels is very important. In this case, just to give an example again. So, the protective status of some vital water streams and water production areas is very important to give it a better status. Also to give a better rational land use planning and avoiding those areas that are not suitable at all for soy. And build better biological corridors between the national parks that are already there. Avoid illegal deforestation and re-establishing forests and vegetation, for example, around water streams where necessary. And improving productive systems of cattle, that's a major factor also in the Grand Chaco, and of soy. And RTRS in this improvement of this productive system has a role to play. So arranging for good governance, there have been all kinds of paradigms over the years that it is a matter of state only, or it's a matter of communities, or it's a matter of the state and scientists defining land use maps that have to be just implemented. Well, the tendency now, and the Dutch government also is very much pushing that, is that private sector can arrange it very well on its own. They stimulated a little bit and organized dialogue between NGOs and the private sector. And they say, well, you arrange it. Well, we say, well, we have to all do this effort and come to new collaborative forms in which all of these play a role. The state, scientific knowledge, private sector and civil society organizations together, and find innovative models of collaboration. And in that, I think that RTRS can be a model, because a lot of thought, a lot of speech, a lot of negotiation has gone into this process. And the set of principles and criteria and the way they have to be proven, they form, let's say, a handbook, not only for certification, but also if you go into landscape approaches. So my argument is amplify RTRS insights as working principles and criteria in the landscape. Now, this is a theoretical model I often use in meetings, I must say, that if the red line, the good governance level that we really need in all aspects, I mean labor, slave labor, deforestation, pesticide use, etc., community relations, then in different countries the green part is that what is covered in laws and regulations. Then the gray part is what has to be covered by certification. Well, we know that in fact the green is not controlled at all. So what certification in fact has to do then, and it isn't fair to do so, but in fact, de facto, certification has to do all that to cover issues that are in the law, to prove legality, and to do the extra stuff. That isn't fair, but actually I think that this control is very important, especially in situations of a difficult governability. What do I mean with that? Governability actually is the enabling and limiting factors to really implement good governance on the ground. There may be laws and regulations, but there may be a difficult implementation or a lack of political will, or even illegality or even impunity on illegality, such as is happening also in northern Argentina and sometimes also in the Netherlands. I mean, it's happening everywhere. For example, in northern Argentina, there is a lot of money available from the soy export taxes meant for conservation. Some groups have seen that only actually 10% reaches the provinces, and of that only 10% reaches the landowner. So that means that only 1% of the money meant for conservation actually is reaching the ground. So that is, even if it's written on paper, I mean, before it's put into practice, that's a difficulty. So bureaucracy, illegality, impunity rule. In that situation, good standards are indispensable. What we did is, hearing that there's a lot of confusion sometimes about what is a good standard and what isn't a good standard, and cannot all other standards do the same. We have tried to provide some clarity by a report we call Betting on Best Quality. If you Google it, you'll find it. Betting on Best Quality and IUCN, you'll find it. And to provide some clarity on standards for biofuels, soy and palm oil, especially those that are approved for use by the EU Renewable Energy Directive, and an extra one that plays an important role, ProTerra. We reviewed 9 existing benchmark studies and did an extra one, made an extra one, have an extra one done by independent experts on particularly the level of assurance. So not only the principles and criteria we reviewed, let's say the results of the benchmark studies, but also which systems are, let's say, providing the best, how would you say that, assurance that it is really done by control and a good quality of control and a good intensity of control. Well, I know that later in this conference that Heleen Van Den Hombergh will shed much more light on these kind of things. But we, in this report, we summarized it like that, boldly, I must say, that the multi-stakeholder systems, they score really the best, not only on principles and criteria, but also on level of assurance. RSB, the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials these days, they may be a model. I mean, they score almost best on everything. But RTRS does quite well as well, not only on principles and criteria, also level of assurance. That is quite high. Now, without wanting to go into detail, but we know that ISCC and that 2BSVS are, let's say, taking off as well as competitors of RTRS. And I hope and think that this report can be a back, let's say, a support to you to say, well, we're here in the best system there is. Please do read it. 10 minutes? So what is the significance of RTRS in the landscape? It's a quality standard of multi-stakeholder consensus. It has integrated norms. It's not only about slave labor, not only about deforestation. It's about much more. It reflects global insights. And it may be strange to say for a person coming from a conservation organization, of course, I would be in favor of no deforestation, zero deforestation. But I think the strong point of RTRS is also that it makes conscious choices in conservation. It makes conscious choices by means of HCV assessments in the field and of the maps that have been produced. So these maps are really innovative, and I mean the roundtables in itself, they're innovation. But having these maps, let's say combining the vertical value chain with geographical planning, I think that is really an important step forward. So making conscious choices in where you want to conserve and why, I think that's very important. RTRS can give an extra impulse to that. So I speak about innovative maps and field level assessments. So, and as shown, it can help close the governance gap, the good governance gap, and support legality in the field, support legality in practice. So, RTRS for certification and beyond, having it as working principles. Well, let me tell you a little bit about what we do to try and support. We support and also critically follow the chain transition process towards 100% RTRS in the Netherlands. It's not easy, to achieve it. They're making headway, especially the dairy sector is doing very well, but the others may be lagging behind a little bit so far. So as NGOs, we sit together with them and say, what's happening? How are you doing? How can we support you? For example, also in defining RTRS or equivalent. What would equivalent really be? What systems could live up to the same standard? And under what conditions? So at the end of the month, we're going to sit down with the sector and say, how can we support you with knowledge as well to achieve what you've promised and to have it done? So we try to provide clarity and promote best quality, also in the EU, because we think that a lot of mistakes have been made there in the EU RED, is having a very little small minimum criteria and making all kinds of systems, allowing them all kinds of systems to prove sustainability, while some are really not so trustworthy at all. Then approach government to play its role. We really have to get governments back on board. They can't just wash their hands. They have to come up and provide good governance for RTRS and other systems to succeed. We promote resource efficiency as well, because UNEP is really right that we can't go on by pushing nature so much over its limits. Then we provide a platform and guide companies to incorporate natural capital into their business in a 6-step approach, and I'm very happy to explain you more about that in the corridors. And through our ecosystem alliance with Wetlands International and with both ends, we support civil society organizations in 16 countries, among others in Paraguay, in Brazil, in Bolivia, and in Argentina. And there is an initiative that I'd like to mention, and tomorrow or this afternoon they'll give a presentation. Is a new initiative called Observatorio Socioambiental de la Soja. They seek to monitor, let's say, the expansion of soy in their countries, the impacts that it has, and come up with good governance recommendations. And in that are Proyungas and Humedales from Argentina, ICB from Brazil, Huira from Paraguay, the great monitors of the Gran Chaco, as you know, and Probioma in Bolivia. How can we move forward? I've been mentioning some of this, but to summarize in 8 points maybe. It may be a collective to-do list. Some of us can add more to it than others. Choose for RTRS or equivalent, really equivalent, and push for the best quality standards. Embed them in the procurement rules of the retailers. And promote minimum criteria also for the level of assurance. It's not only that what is promised in principles and criteria, but also how it is controlled. And then we say it is quality in the first place, not quantity only, that we want to achieve. Yes, 100% RTRS in 2050, perfect, it can be done. But if it's 2017 and it's 100% of a good quality, then it's more important than have 100% of something in 2050. We say endurance is needed. Yes, the initiative has been going on for some years, but it takes time to implement it in the field, and it also takes time to implement it into institutional requirements of the retail, for example. It takes a couple of years, as we see, to really embed it into rules. Creativity, yes, to overcome bottlenecks, new collaborations, recognizing each other's efforts, and meet to strategize. What can you do for good governance, and what can the RTRS do for good governance, and really recognize each other's efforts. I think that is an important thing. Involve governments, as I said. Hold them accountable to their role. Raise that bar. Stimulate also with tax measures, etc. Stimulate good certification. Communicate about it. Provide clarity to producers in the field. In environmental licenses or whatever, they have to have security over production. Combat corruption and apply the law, just to mention a few things. Then, as I said, I think the maps are an innovative tool. Mobilize them for RTRS certification, but also beyond. Look at conservation and other measures from a landscape view and try and connect the different farms to each other so that the real good and sustainable landscape mosaic is ensured. So also in cases of legality, you can use those kind of maps to ensure connectivity between important areas. Mobilize payments for ecosystem services. Yes, we need creativity. We need all our relations with the wealthy to help, let's say, the first costs of HCV conservation. We know that the premium has to go up for those who have to really make sacrifices. So that's why we also support the RTRS search for pest mechanisms that is happening now. Buy those credits. There's, I understood, more than 1 million tons of certificates on the shelf now that are not yet sold. And it's very important to keep those farmers who have stuck out their neck to become RTRS certified, to keep them motivated. So these credits have to be sold while maybe building area linkages and building mass balance systems, etc. But the credits really, they have to be sold. I thought almost of starting a crowdsourcing website to do that, but I think it should be done otherwise. And not easy as well, but overcome the obstacle discourse. I think that sometimes traders say to the farmers, yeah, nobody's waiting for your sustainable production, and say to the buyers that nobody's willing to supply. But I think it can be done, and actually it's not hard science, but it's an estimate that for a good RTRS-fed chicken, a consumer, if it would be 10 euro per ton of RTRS certified soy, it would translate into 1 euro cent for a kilo of chicken. Well, I don't think that in Europe there will be one buyer that would even notice the difference. Thank you.